Modern mill is on the rise, and it's probably one of the most exciting things I've seen in a very long time. To not only have a new card printed into the archetype, but a card that just provides so much versatility. I'm talking about Jace the Perfected Mind out of Phyrexia All Will Be One, providing that mid-range capability, grinding out your opponent, or even just that explosive top deck ability, all in one. It's just so exciting to have something new in the archetype, have fresh eyes on it, have people see what Mill can do and what Mill has always been capable of in a small way. But with all those eyes, it's not only that more people are playing the archetype, but more people are trying to beat it. It's not just the non-Mill players trying to find the latest shuffle effect tech, but it's also the Mill players wondering, how do we approach the Mill mirror? And that's what I wanted to do today. In this quick video, I wanted to give you my 3 tips as to how to approach the modern mill mirror, and just really 3 things to consider when you're going up against another crab savant. Firstly, I'm going to go right into the fact that I'm going to be going into Dimir Mill. I'm not going to be talking about any Sultai tips, Esper tips. We're keeping it generally to the mono blue Dimir style of flavors in modern, the more common ones that you're going to see. So let's hop right into it at number 1. The first tip I have for you is simply that you need to get aggressive or you need to get reactive. Now in game 1, I'm hoping that you can get aggressive. Hopefully you've got a crab out and your opponent's got a crab out, and you need to commit to that crab plan. I don't want you to think about drowning the lock or anything. I want you to play your fetches. I want you to play your other mill spells, cycle your Fracture Sanity, whatever you feel like is important in that kind of certain scenario. And obviously there's exceptions, but throw mill spells at your opponent's face, because the more cards that are in their graveyard, the less mill spells they have. And of course, the less effective cards like Visions of Beyond become, because hey, the less cards that are in your graveyard, they don't necessarily want to be drawing more cards. Now in the game 2 scenario, either get aggressive by mulliganing to an aggressive hand that has a lot of crabs, or mulligan to a reactive hand and really commit to that. Have those spell pierces, have those fatal pushes for those turn 1 crabs, and have those other interactive spells that we're going to go through, and make sure you are committing to stopping everything your opponent does, because when they're getting aggressive, you need to bring the tempo back to your side. Mulligan hard and mulligan well. My tip number 2 is going to go to a specific card, one that almost defines the archetype, in Visions of Beyond. And remembering that the check 20 clause is parallel in the sense that it checks all graveyards, your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard, as to who has 20 cards. So if your opponent is getting, ahead of the game and they're milling you and you got more than 20 cards in your graveyard, you can cast your own Visions, draw 3 cards, and catch up that way. And it's also something to keep in mind for your opponent. If you're milling them over aggressively and maybe you're slowing your roll, maybe you want to keep that drawn on the lock. Maybe you want to keep that extra counterspell, maybe not for their mill spell, but for that Visions of Beyond that they're going to use to refuel. This is also very useful to note. It with Jace the Perfected Mind, that -2 has that same clause. It allows you to mill 3 and essentially cast a better worded Visions of Beyond, but it still has that parallel check clause. So when you're casting something like that, you're going to be able to add cards to your graveyard or add cards to your opponent's graveyard to draw 3. And it also might get you to think about turning Hedron Crab triggers at yourself instead of your opponent. Maybe you're closer to 20 and you need 3 cards to just refuel, get more cards to throw at your opponent's face, and get the game back at your tempo. Now, my tip number 3 is going to go to another card that has been probably the key piece of interaction in the deck since its inception, and probably the most unique use of the card in Magic's history. I'm talking about Surgical Extraction and a little bit of Extirpate. Surgical Extraction is going to be one of your best friends in the deck and in the mill mirror, because once they cast a mill spell or you mill out a mill spell from them, taking that card out, surgically extracting that out of their graveyard, then their deck, then their hand, is not only going to help you eliminate future options for them, but also shrink cards out of their deck, right? That's simply taking cards out of their deck and also eliminating, as I first said, options. So if you're milling them out, they have 20 cards, and as I mentioned in that kind of that last tip, you're casting Visions of Beyond, or they're trying to refuel. Doesn't matter what they're drawing if they're not drawing mill spells. Keep that in mind. Take that Surgical Extraction, bring that in. Do not take out Surgical Extraction. It's not about necessarily milling more. There is a little bit of resource management, and especially when it comes to the cards like this, especially cards like Extirpate with Split Second, don't be afraid to take out the non-basic lands, the Watery Graves, the Field of Ruins, the Polluted Deltas, especially if they're on a crab heavy draw, and you maybe surgical them once and you see some lands in their hand. stumble them. They, mill is a very expensive costing to, a lot of cards in the deck are expensive to play per mana. They're 3 mana, they're 5 mana to hard cast. If you're not searching a library, those archive traps are 5 mana. It can be very tough to get those spells off if your opponent doesn't have any lands, and those crabs aren't really just going to be sitting pretty if they don't have any lands to play. So it's always that secret bit. It may not just be the spells you want to hit, but Surgical and Extirpate provide you that expansive variability as to what you can do against your mill opponent. Now, I will give you one bonus tip. I did say 3, but I will give you a bonus tip, and it's something that I would only recommend in the near future. As people play more mill and it kind of tapers off, with the excitement, you're going to come across more mill mirrors, especially in the challenges, especially in the leagues. I want you to think about this bonus fact of maybe using one of your sideboard slots and join the Darkside and play your own shuffle effect. Now, I know a lot of you are probably typing in the YouTube comments already, angry at me, Shaft. Why are you recommending this? Look, it's just the easy way out, especially against the newer players that don't know that Tasha's Hideous Laughter is not good in the mirror. Hasn't been for a while, let me be honest. Something like Emrakul's the Aeon's Torn is going to be able to get those newer players very easily. It's going to be a card that's a one of, very hard for your opponent to necessarily get value out of surgicaling. They use one of their surgicals on this to get rid of this, but they're not hitting your mill spells. They might not have the mass exile effects against you, so getting rid of this might actually be a lot harder if they don't have that, and just gets rid of the value that cards like Fractured Sanity or Archive Trap might have at instant speed. They cast those spells, you shuffle your stuff back in. And honestly, it's not just a shuffle effect. What's great about Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, especially with a card and a land that's been played in mill historically, when you're playing something like Shelldock Isle, you can actually play your Shelldock Isle, and if you find that Emrakul, you can put it under there and cast it for 2 mana. That's right, you pay the 1, tap this, so it's kind of like using 2 lands, 2 mana, to cast an Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. You can get really tricky with it, especially in the mill mirror. A lot of people get a little too trigger happy. They realize that life doesn't really matter in this matchup, and you can just fetch shock whenever you want. It's actually the correct thing to do. But in that niche scenario where you're playing a Shuffle Titan, something like Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, you're going to be able to cast that, and you might actually just be able to one-shot your opponent. So that's a great way to come back from behind. Maybe you have an Emrakul's stuck on your Shelldock Isle, and your opponent hasn't been able to Field of Ruin it. Well, now that your deck is under 20 cards and you're on the back burner, you're going to cast your Emrakul, take that extra turn, attack in with the Annihilator. They're all out of lands, they're all out of crabs, they can't cast anything, and you've just one-shot them because they've been fetch shocking all game long. Keep it in mind, it's actually not half bad. But again, it is the dark side. I know it's a little kind of stigma-y, but don't knock it till you try it. Just saying. Now, that's about it. Those are all of my tips. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What are some of your tips for the mill mirror? I think this will be a good repository for everyone coming in. Check the comment section down below, see what other people are saying. I'll try and kind of like and push good comments to the top, and just let me know what you think about my tips here. Are these any good? Are you a fan of the Emrakul in the sideboard? What do you think about the new Jace, the Perfected Mind? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to see more videos like this, you gotta like, you gotta favorite, you gotta share, you gotta hit the bell notification for everything coming this week, and I'll catch you in the next one.